We shall commence this module by discussing the meaning of fiscal policy. The fiscal policy is concerned with the raising of government revenue and incurring of government expenditure. To create revenue and to incur expenditure, the government frames a policy called fiscal policy or budgetary policy. So, the fiscal policy is majorly related to government revenue and government expenditure. Understand the meaning of fiscal policy. Know the main objectives of fiscal policy in India. Understand public expenditure with its meaning and its importance. Know effects of public expenditure on production. Know effects of public expenditure on distribution. Let us now discuss the main objectives of fiscal policy in India. The fiscal policy is intended to accomplish definite objectives as follows. The first objective is development by effective mobilization of resources. The main objective of fiscal policy is to make sure there is rapid economic growth and development. This objective of economic growth and development can be achieved by mobilization of financial resources. The central and state governments in India have used fiscal policy to mobilize resources. The financial resources can be mobilized by taxation. Through successful fiscal policies, the government basically wants to mobilize resources by means of direct taxes as well as indirect taxes, because taxation is the most important source of resource mobilization in India. Public savings. The resources can be mobilized through public savings by decreasing the level of government expenditure and increasing surpluses of public sector enterprises. Next, private savings. Through efficient fiscal measures, for example, tax benefits, the government can collect resources from private sector and households. Resources can be mobilized through government borrowings by the means of treasury bills, issue of government bonds, etc., loans from domestic and foreign parties, and by deficit financing. Second is efficient allocation of financial resources. The central and state governments have tried to create efficient allocation of financial resources. These resources are assigned for development activities, which in general is expenditure on railways, infrastructure, etc., while non-development activities include expenditure on defense, interest payments, subsidies, etc. In general, the fiscal policy ought to guarantee that the resources are allocated for production of goods and services which are socially desirable. Therefore, India's fiscal policy is designed in a way so as to promote production of desirable goods and dampen those goods which are socially undesirable. Next objective is reduction in inequalities of income and wealth. Fiscal policy aims at achieving equity or social justice by decreasing income inequalities in the midst of different sects of the society. The direct taxes like income tax are levied more on the rich people in comparison to lower income groups. Indirect taxes are more in the case of semi-luxury and luxury items, which are more often than not consumed by the upper middle class and the upper class. The government invests an important fraction of its tax revenue in the execution of poverty alleviation programs to advance the situations of poor people in society. One of the major objectives of fiscal policy is to control inflation and stabilize price. Thus, the government always intends to control the inflation by reducing the fiscal deficits, introducing tax saving schemes, productive use of financial resources, etc. The next objective is employment generation. The government is making every possible effort to increase employment in the country through effective fiscal measure. The investment done in infrastructure sector has led to direct and indirect employment. Lower taxes and duties on small scale industrial SSI units motivate more investment and accordingly generate more employment. Many rural employment programs have been carried out by Government of India to solve problems in rural areas. Likewise, self-employment scheme is carried out to give employment to technically qualified people in the urban areas. Another major objective of the fiscal policy is bringing about a balanced regional development. There are many incentives from the government for setting up projects in backward areas such as cash subsidy, concession in taxes and duties in the form of tax holidays, finance at concessional interest rates, etc. Next objective is reducing the deficit in the balance of payment. Fiscal policy attempts to encourage more exports by way of fiscal measures such as exemption of income tax on export earnings, exemption of central excise duties and customs, exemption of sales tax and octroi, etc. The foreign exchange is also preserved by providing fiscal benefits to import substitute industries, imposing custom duties on imports, etc. The foreign exchange earned by means of exports and saved by means of import substitute helps to solve balance of payment problem. In this way, adverse balance of payment can be corrected either by imposing duties or imports or by giving subsidies to export. The objective of fiscal policy is also to increase the rate of capital formation so as to accelerate the rate of economic growth. An underdeveloped country is trapped in vicious danger cycle of poverty majorly due to capital deficiency. In order to increase the rate of capital formation, the fiscal policy must be efficiently designed to encourage savings and discourage and reduce spending. The fiscal policy intends to increase the national income of a country. This is because fiscal policy helps in the process of capital formation. This results in economic growth, which in turn increases the GDP, per capita income and national income of the country. Another objective is development of infrastructure. Government has put emphasis on the infrastructure development for the purpose of achieving economic growth. The fiscal policy measure like taxation creates revenue to the government. A section of the government's revenue is invested in the development of infrastructure. Due to this, all sectors of the economy get a boost. Lastly, fiscal policy attempts to encourage more exports by means of fiscal measures such as exemption of income tax on export earnings, exemption of sales tax and octroi, etc. Foreign exchange provides fiscal benefits to import substitute industries. The foreign exchange collected by means of exports and saved by means of import substitutes help to solve balance of payment problem. Next, we will discuss the meaning of public expenditure and its importance. The expenses incurred by the governments for its own maintenance, preservation and welfare of the economy as a whole is referred to as public expenditure. In other words, it refers to the expenses of public authorities, central, state and local governments in a federation for the satisfaction of collective needs of the citizens or for promotion of economic and social welfare. The development functions include education, public health, social security, irrigation, canal, drainage, roads, buildings, etc. The major cause of increase in the public expenditure is nothing but these developmental functions. Hence, the study of public expenditure has become very significant in the study of public finance. The two major reasons for the same are A. The economic activities of the state has increased manifold, and B. Nature and volume of public expenditure have greatly affected the economic life of the country in a different manner. That is, it has affected production and distribution and general level of economic activities. In the laissez-faire era, the state was assigned a very limited role to play. The functions assigned to the state were based on the principle of least interference, or that government is the best which spends the least. According to the classical school led by Adam Smith, restricted the functions of the state to justice, police and arms. They considered government expenditure wasteful and that money could be used much well by private persons than by the government. Adam Smith, in his magnum opus The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, observed that the sovereign has three main duties to perform as a. To protect the society from violence and invasion of other independent societies, b. To protect against injustice, and c. Erecting and maintaining certain public works. According to David Ricardo, if you want a peaceful government, you must reduce the budget. J.B. Say opined that the very system of all plans of finance is to spend little, and the best of all taxes is that which is least in amount. In recent time, public expenditure has been increased enormously. The main reason is that the functions of governments have been increased manifold. The modern states are no more police states but welfare states. Adolf Wagner, a German economist, presented his famous law of increase of state activities. He states that comprehensive comparison of different countries and different times show that among progressive people with which alone we are concerned, an increase regularly takes place in the activity of both central and local governments. This increase is both intensive and extensive. Professor R. A. Musgrave, the 20th century economist, advocated public expenditure since a government is forced to do many activities such as: first, activities to secure a reallocation of resources; second, redistribution activities; third, stabilizing activities; and fourth, commercial activities. Governments constantly undertake new functions while they perform both old and new functions more efficiently and completely. In this way, the economic requirements of the people to an increasing extent and in a satisfactory function are satisfied by the central and local governments. Causes for the increase in public expenditure. One of the most important features of the present century is the phenomenal growth of public expenditure. Few important reasons for the growth of public expenditure are as follows. First, welfare state. Modern states are no more police states. They have to look into the welfare of the masses, for which the state has to perform a number of functions. They have to carry out and generate employment opportunities, social security measures and other welfare activities. All these need massive expenditure. Second, defense expenditure. Modern warfare is very costly. Wars and possibilities of wars have forced the nation to be equipped with arms all the time. This causes a large amount of public expenditure. Third, growth of democracy. The form of democratic government is highly expensive. The conduct of elections, continuation of democratic institutions like legislatures, etc. leads to large amount of expenditure. Fourth, growth of population. Tremendous growth of population necessitates enormous spending on the part of the modern governments. For meeting the needs of the growing population, more educational institutions, food materials, hospitals, roads and other amenities of life are to be provided. Fifth, rise in price level. Rises in prices have considerably enhanced public expenditure in recent years. Higher prices mean higher spending on the part of the government on items like payment of salaries, purchase of goods and services and so on. Sixth, expansion public sector. Countries aiming at socialistic pattern of society have to give more importance to public sector. Consequent development of public sector enhances public expenditure. Seventh, Development expenditure for implementing developmental programs like 5-year plans. Modern governments are incurring huge expenditure. 8th, public debt. Along with debt rises the problem like payment of interest and repayment of the principal amount. This results in an increase in public expenditure. 9th, grants and loans to state government and UTs. It is an important feature of public expenditure of the central government of India. The government provides assistance in the form of grants and aid and loans to the states and to the UTs. 10th, poverty alleviation programs. As poverty ratio is high, huge amount of expenditure is required for implementing alleviation programs. Classification of public expenditure. Public expenditure has been classified into A. Revenue expenditure and B. Capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure is current expenditure. For example, it includes administrative expenditure and maintenance expenditure. This expenditure is of a recurring type. Capital expenditure is of capital nature and is incurred once for all. It is non-recurring expenditure. For example, expenditure on building multi-purpose projects or on setting up big factories like steel plants, money spent on land, machinery and equipment. Revenue budget or revenue account is related to current financial transactions of the government which are of recurring in nature. Revenue budget consists of the revenue receipts of the government and the expenditure is met from these revenues. Revenue account is concerned with taxes, duties, fees, fines and penalties, revenue from government estates, receipts from government commercial concerns and other miscellaneous items, and the expenditure therefrom. Revenue receipts include receipts from taxation, profits of enterprise, other non-tax receipts like administrative revenue, fees, fines, special assessment, etc., gifts, grants, etc. Revenue expenditure includes interest payment, defense expenditure, major subsidies, pensions, etc. The capital account is related to the acquisition and disposal of capital assets. Capital budget is a statement of estimated capital receipts and payments of the government over fiscal year. It consists of capital receipts and capital expenditure. The capital account is concerned with expenditure usually met from borrowed funds with the aim of increasing concrete assets of a material character or of reducing recurring liabilities like construction of buildings, irrigation projects, etc. Moving on to the effects of public expenditure on production. Just as taxation, other things being equal, should reduce production as little as possible, so the public expenditure should increase it as much as possible. Professor Delton. The effects of public expenditure on production can be evaluated by examining its effects on the following. A. Effects upon ability to work, save and invest. B. Effects upon willingness to work, save and invest. C. Effects upon diversion of economic resources as between different uses and localities. Ability to work, save and invest. Public expenditure may tend to influence the ability of the people to work, save and invest. This is described as efficiency effect. Public expenditure designed to increase the efficiency of the people will certainly improve their ability to work. When a person's ability to work is increased, his earnings will also increase. As a consequence, his ability to save also improves. For example, expenditure on education, health services and cheap housing facilities, subsidized food, free education, means of transportation, communication, etc. will increase the efficiency of the people to work. Similarly, public expenditure incurred for maintaining law and order build up the confidence in the minds of the people, which will in turn encourages them to invest in production activities. Public expenditure may have adverse effects also. If public expenditure is spent on wasteful social functions or on the production of intoxicants and drugs which are detrimental to health. The ability to work, save and invest of the people may adversely be affected. Hence, public expenditure should be incurred in such a way that it is most beneficial to the entire society. Willingness to work, save and invest. Public expenditure may tend to affect the willingness of the people to work, save and invest, which is described as incentive effect. As far as the will to save and invest is concerned, it depends to great extent on the character of public expenditure and public policy of the governments. For example, old age pension, provident fund benefit, insurance against sickness and unemployment allowances etc. have an adverse effect on the willingness of the people to work, save and invest. This is because people will have a feeling that the government will take care of them when they are unable to earn an income. Therefore, public expenditure must be incurred in such a way that it may not unfavorably affect the incentive to work of the people. If, however, the benefit increases with the increase in work and the volume of savings, the willingness to work, save and invest will increase and vice versa. Similarly, the willingness to work can be increased by making the benefits conditional. That is, the people may be required to contribute something in order to avail the benefits of social security measures. In brief, public expenditure should be incurred systematically and in a planned manner in order to provide social security measures to the maximum extent. Public expenditure must also provide opportunities under which savings and investments are properly rewarded and do not enlarge inequalities. Diversion of resources between different uses and areas. Public expenditure can significantly influence the level and pattern of production through the diversion of economic resources between various uses and areas. Thus, the government has to incur public expenditure in those areas and regions which will secure maximum national production and maximum social advantage. For example, the public expenditure on projects like roads, railways, irrigation, energy, etc. helps in accelerating the tempo of economic development. Creation of such essential projects through diversion of economic resources from private use to public use is very essential in developing countries. Similarly, concessions and subsidies by government may help a lot of industries and agricultural activities. According to Dalton, the role of public expenditure in the diversion of economic resources from private use to government use and as among different regions is important only when the area of economic activities of the government is limited, that is, in a capitalistic economy. The forms of public expenditure which increase the productive power and are socially very much desirable for the transfer of resources are generally of the following nature: A. Debt redemption. B. Developmental projects such as irrigation, power and transport, roads, railways, etc. C. Promotion of education, research, inventions, training, etc. D. Provision of public health, and E. Social security, etc. Public expenditure also results in the diversion of resources among different regions. This will reduce the regional inequality, which is an important objective of Indian economic planning. In order to bring about regional balanced growth, the government has to provide special expenditure programs to economically backward regions. Such diversion of resources among regions is made possible by setting up a federal system of government. Grants and aid from central government to state government and from state government to local governments are examples of diversion of resources. In short, the public expenditure does have many favorable effects on production. To conclude the effect of public expenditure on production, we can quote Dalton once again. Whereas taxation taken alone may check production, public expenditure taken alone should almost certainly increase it. Further, we understand the effects of public expenditure on distribution. One of the important modern state policies, especially in developing countries and socialistic countries, is reduction of inequalities in the distribution of income and wealth. Public expenditure plays fundamental role in realizing this objective. According to Dalton, the system of public expenditure is the best which has the strongest tendency to reduce inequality of income. Public expenditure, which is in the form of money grants, supply of social goods and services, social security measures, subsidies, etc., undoubtedly affects the distribution of income in a country in socially desirable way. Expenditures carried out for benefiting the poor people, such as those on social services like free medical treatment, free education, unemployment benefit, etc., will enhance the benefit of the poor section than the rich. This will help in reducing the gulf between the rich and the poor in the distribution of income and wealth, thus bringing about justice in the economy. Next is public expenditure and stability. Economic stability refers to a fairly stable level of national income, employment, prices, savings and investments in the economy. The economy may face cyclical fluctuations on account of imperfections in the market, depression and inflation. Public expenditure can be used to check the fluctuations. According to Lord J. M. Keynes, economic instability implies departure from full employment at stable price level. It is the deficiency of the effective demand caused by a low marginal propensity to consume coupled with low marginal efficiency of investment in developed countries. The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, 1936. During depression, the effective demand falls short of what is required. Deficiency in effective demand leads to unemployment, which leads to reduction in consumption and finally to fall in production. In order to solve the situation, public expenditure needs to be enhanced to compensate the deficiency in effective demand. The increased public expenditure in the times of depression is described as compensatory public expenditure. In a period of depression, the suitable public expenditure policy will be deficit budgeting, that is, current expenditure should be more than the current revenue. In the same way, during the time of inflation, rising prices, the public expenditure has a completely different role to play. The government has to adopt surplus budgeting policy, that is, the government should spend less than its revenue. During inflation, that part of the public expenditure which decreases the funds going to the people with higher propensity to consume is reduced. After full employment, public expenditure is likely to add to inflationary pressure, for public expenditure will further increase the purchasing power of the people without any corresponding rise in production. Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. The fiscal policy is concerned with government expenditure and government revenue. The central and the state governments in India have utilized fiscal policy to mobilize resources. The financial resources can be mobilized by taxation, public savings, private savings. India's fiscal policy is designed in such a manner so as to encourage production of desirable goods and discourage those goods which are socially undesirable. The direct taxes such as income tax are charged more on the rich people as compared to lower income groups. Indirect taxes are also more in the case of semi-luxury and luxury items which happen to be majorly consumed by the upper middle class and the upper class. Lower taxes and duties on small scale industrial units promote more investment and as a result create more employment. The fiscal policy should be designed in a way that it encourages savings and discourages spending. A section of the government's revenue is invested in the development of infrastructure. Due to this, all sectors of the economy get a boost. The foreign exchange earned by the means of exports and saved by the means of import substitutes help to solve balance of payment problem. Governments continuously undertake new functions at the same time as they perform both old and new functions completely and efficiently. Public expenditure should be incurred in a fashion that it is most beneficial to the entire society. Public expenditure must be incurred in such a way that it may not unfavorably affect the incentive to work of the people. The forms of public expenditure which increase the productive power and are socially very much desirable for the transfer of resources are generally of the following nature. Expenditures carried out to uplift the poor people, such as those on social services like free medical treatment, free education, unemployment benefit, etc., will enhance the benefit of the poor section than the rich. The government has to adopt surplus budgeting policy. That is, the government should spend less than its revenue.